The hall was buzzing with excitement that evening, filled with people dressed in their finest clothes, all gathered for a celebration of music and talent. Lights reflected off crystal chandeliers, and the polished wooden floors shone under the warm glow of lamps. Musicians moved gracefully, tuning their instruments, while a quiet hum of conversation floated through the room. Among the crowd, a young prince walked carefully, trying to balance the weight of expectation with his own curiosity. He was only a child, but he had grown up around music, attending concerts and events, learning to appreciate melodies and harmonies that most of his age could barely imagine. Yet tonight felt different. Tonight, something unusual was about to happen, something no one could have predicted. The prince's family was nearby, chatting politely with other members of the royal circle. Their smiles were warm but watchful, their eyes occasionally flicking toward him as if to remind him to behave like a prince, to remain calm, and to observe, not to act. The prince, however, had a spark in his eyes, a mix of mischief and courage. He moved slowly toward the grand piano that stood in the center of the room, noticing its sleek black surface and shining ivory keys. The instrument seemed almost alive under the spotlights, calling out to anyone brave enough to touch it. Near the piano, the famous pianist of the evening was finishing a conversation with a journalist. Known for incredible skill and a playful personality, the pianist had performed on the world's biggest stages and had a reputation for surprising audiences. Even in such formal settings, there was an air of mischief around them, a feeling that anything could happen at any moment. They glanced at the young prince, who was peering at the piano with a mixture of awe and hesitation, and a sly smile spread across their face. Without a second thought, the pianist leaned toward the prince and said in a voice that carried over the quiet murmur of the room, "Why don't you try playing a piece on the piano?" The words were spoken lightly, as a joke, meant to tease and amuse rather than challenge. But the effect was immediate. The room seemed to pause for a heartbeat, and eyes turned toward the prince. Some people gasped quietly, others stifled laughs, and a few whispered to each other, wondering if the prince would actually accept the dare. The prince froze, unsure of how to respond. His heart beat faster, not from fear alone, but from the thrill of possibility. He had played piano at home, practiced quietly, and even taken lessons, but he had never performed in front of such a crowd, never under the gaze of someone so renowned. The idea of sitting down at the grand piano with the spotlight on him both terrified and excited him. He glanced back at his family, who were smiling politely, offering silent encouragement, yet keeping a watchful eye. They had not expected this moment either. People in the room began to sense something special unfolding. The pianist's expression suggested they were fully serious about the prank, but their eyes sparkled with genuine curiosity, as if they were already imagining what the prince might do. A few photographers began to quietly prepare their cameras, sensing a photo opportunity that could capture a once-in-a-lifetime moment. The young prince took a deep breath, feeling the weight of attention pressing gently on his small shoulders. His fingers twitched slightly as he considered the keys, and for a moment, doubt crept in. The pianist leaned closer and added with a playful wink, "I promise I won't tell anyone if it's just a tiny tune." The words, meant to calm, had the opposite effect. They made the prince feel both challenged and trusted at the same time. It was as if a door had opened into a new world, a world where he could step beyond the usual rules of being a prince and simply be a child who loved music. He glanced at the keyboard again, noticing the smooth surface of the keys, the way they seemed to shine even brighter under the lights, and a thought crossed his mind. Maybe this prank could become something more. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the piano. Each step felt significant, like walking into a story he had only imagined in his dreams. The crowd watched silently, the air thick with anticipation. Some adults held their breath, wondering if the prince would embarrass himself or surprise everyone. Others smiled quietly, sensing that moments like these rarely came by, and that they were witnessing something unique. The pianist stepped aside slightly, giving the prince room, and their expression softened into one of encouragement. "Just press a few keys," they suggested lightly, their voice still playful but gentle. "See what happens." No one expects a masterpiece. It was an invitation, a gentle push that nudged the young prince toward the piano with a mix of caution and courage. The prince placed his small hands on the keys, feeling the smooth, cool surface beneath his fingers. For a moment, nothing happened. He hesitated, unsure which notes to press. But then he remembered the songs he had practiced at home. A simple melody formed in his mind, and he let his fingers move almost instinctively. The sound filled the room, soft at first, but carrying a surprising clarity. Eyes widened among the audience. Some could not believe what they were hearing. The music was simple, but there was something special in the way he played it, a natural rhythm that hinted at talent beyond his years. Encouraged by the gentle applause and smiles from those around him, the prince began to play with more confidence. He experimented with different keys, testing the limits of the piano and his own abilities. The pianist watched intently, their eyes alight with amazement and delight. What began as a prank, a light-hearted joke meant to tease, was turning into a genuine moment of music and wonder. The audience leaned in, captivated not only by the notes but by the courage and curiosity of the young prince. As he played, the prince forgot the audience, forgot the prank, and even forgot his nerves. He was absorbed in the music, letting it flow naturally through him. Each chord brought him a little more confidence, each melody a little more joy. The pianist, unable to resist, moved closer, nodding in approval and occasionally offering a small suggestion or a hint of encouragement. It was clear that what started as a joke had become a shared experience, a magical moment of connection between teacher and student, prankster and performer. The room, once filled with quiet conversation, had become still. All eyes were on the prince, yet no one seemed to breathe too loudly, afraid of disturbing the fragile beauty of the moment. The music was gentle, playful, and surprisingly expressive. People began to smile, some even softly tapping their feet to the rhythm, drawn in by the unexpected talent and courage on display. When the prince finally finished, there was a pause, a heartbeat of silence, as if everyone was too astonished to react immediately. Then, applause erupted, loud and heartfelt. People cheered, some clapped vigorously, and a few even whistled softly in admiration. The pianist leaned down, offering a warm smile, and said, "I only meant to tease, but I see you've taken this prank and made it your own. Well done." The prince's cheeks flushed with pride, a mixture of relief, joy, and the thrill of accomplishment. He had stepped into a moment of playfulness and emerged with something real and beautiful. Family members approached, their expressions a mix of surprise and pride. They hugged him gently, whispered congratulations, and made playful remarks about how the prince had turned a simple joke into a performance worth remembering. The photographers captured every moment, the flashes highlighting the prince's expression of wonder and happiness. The story of what had just happened would soon spread beyond the hall, shared in newspapers, magazines, and social media. A tale of courage, humor, and unexpected talent. As the evening continued, the prince's heart was still racing, but in the best way possible. He had faced something new, something daring, and had done so with grace and curiosity. The pianist returned to their own seat, giving the prince a subtle nod of respect and amusement. It was a moment neither of them would forget, a story that would be told many times over, about how a simple prank led to a moment of real connection, creativity, and courage. The prince had discovered not only the joy of music but the thrill of stepping into the unknown and embracing it fully, a lesson that would stay with him far longer than any applause or recognition. After the applause settled, the young prince moved away from the piano, his fingers still tingling from the keys and his mind racing with excitement. The hall was still alive with energy, but now a new buzz had taken over. People were whispering, pointing discreetly, and trying not to stare too obviously. Some were smiling in disbelief, others were nodding to themselves, impressed by what they had just witnessed. The pianist watched from a short distance, leaning casually against a wall, a look of satisfaction and curiosity on their face. They had intended a harmless joke, yet what had unfolded was far beyond what anyone could have predicted. The prince's family approached him with gentle concern and curiosity. They could see that he was still flushed with excitement, and they wanted to know how he felt. Did it feel strange, sitting there in front of everyone? One of the adults asked softly, their voice filled with warmth and care. The prince nodded, hesitating a little before answering. Yes, at first it was scary, but then, it felt like I could just play, like the music was my own and no one was watching. He smiled, the kind of smile that carried both pride and relief. The adults exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting quiet amazement and the unspoken thought that this moment would be remembered for years. Even as he spoke, the pianist moved closer again, speaking in a tone just loud enough for the prince to hear. Most people would have stopped at the first note or frozen in fear. But you kept going, and it sounded natural and confident. That's not easy at all. The prince's cheeks turned a little red, not from embarrassment, but from a sense of accomplishment. He hadn't expected praise from someone so famous, someone whose opinion seemed to hold the weight of the world in the world of music. The words made him feel both proud and inspired, planting a seed of confidence that he hadn't known he possessed. People in the room began to linger near the piano, some even approaching quietly to offer compliments. One elderly musician nodded approvingly, commenting, "It's rare to see such ease and curiosity in someone so young. You have a natural sense for the instrument." The prince's eyes lit up. Hearing such praise made him feel seen, as if his effort, courage, and love for music mattered more than the formal rules and expectations that usually surrounded him. The realization settled gently in his heart. Music wasn't just notes on a page or a requirement to perform. It was a way to express himself, even in unexpected situations. The young prince took a few steps away, his mind still replaying the melody he had just played. He could hear it echoing in his head, imagining different ways he could have played the same song, the choices he might make next time. He felt a surge of energy and curiosity, a desire to explore further, even though he didn't yet fully understand where it would lead. The hall, though still filled with people, seemed quieter now, as if everyone recognized that something special had occurred, and they didn't want to disturb the moment. The sense of importance and magic that had settled over the room was tangible, and the prince felt it fully. The pianist moved beside him again, lowering their voice to speak privately. "Do you like playing?" "Really like it." The prince nodded eagerly, eyes wide with excitement. "Yes, I've always liked it, but tonight, it felt different. It felt like it could be anything I wanted it to be." The pianist smiled, seeing the spark of curiosity and courage. That's the best part about music. It can be anything and it can take you anywhere. You just need to trust yourself and let the notes come out naturally. The prince listened intently, absorbing each word, feeling a connection to someone who not only understood music, but also understood the courage it took to step into the unknown. As the conversation continued, the prince noticed other children in the audience who had been shy and reserved before now glancing at him with admiration. They whispered to each other, eyes wide, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Seeing their reactions, the prince realized that courage and curiosity could inspire others, even in the smallest ways. It wasn't just about the applause or the praise. It was about stepping forward when others expected you to hesitate, about trusting yourself even when the situation felt intimidating. A few moments later, the prince was invited to sit briefly with the pianist at the side of the stage, where they could speak more comfortably. The pianist showed him small techniques, gently guiding his fingers and explaining subtle nuances of rhythm and touch. The prince listened carefully, eyes focused, his small hands moving across the keys as he tried to mimic the gestures. The experience was thrilling. He felt a mixture of learning, curiosity, and the joy of discovery. The pianist encouraged experimentation, emphasizing that mistakes were part of the process and that every attempt added to his understanding of music. Meanwhile, the audience gradually shifted its attention back to the event, but whispers of the prince's unexpected performance continued to ripple through the crowd. People exchanged stories and observations in quiet tones, recounting how a playful joke had led to a surprisingly confident display of talent. Even the journalists, who were used to polished performances and carefully planned moments, could not hide their amazement. They scribbled notes and prepared to capture the story, knowing that this unexpected moment was one that readers would find irresistible. The prince, for his part, was lost in his own world. Each note, each chord, felt like a conversation between him and the piano. The playful prank had opened a door to something deeper, something personal and meaningful. He began experimenting with the melody again, slightly altering rhythms and testing new harmonies, feeling the thrill of creativity. The pianist observed, occasionally offering a tip or a nod of encouragement, letting the young prince explore at his own pace. It was a lesson not just in music but in bravery, patience, and self-expression. As the evening drew on, the prince's family returned to gently guide him toward the next part of the event. Though he reluctantly left the piano, the excitement remained in his eyes. The pianist gave a final smile, a silent acknowledgement of the courage and curiosity the prince had shown. Even in leaving, the prince felt a sense of triumph and the knowledge that he had stepped beyond mere playfulness into a moment that was uniquely his. Back with his family, the prince quietly reflected on what had happened. He realized that even small actions, like following a playful suggestion, could lead to unforgettable experiences. The mixture of fear, courage, and joy had created a memory that he would carry with him, not just as a story to share, but as a lesson in trusting himself and embracing opportunities. Music had revealed a new side of him, one that could rise to a challenge, enjoy the process, and even surprise others along the way. Later that night, as the hall began to empty and the lights dimmed, the prince lingered for a moment, looking back at the piano. The black and white keys seemed to glimmer in the dim glow, holding the promise of future melodies and adventures. The pianist, packing up their instrument, caught his glance and nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that tonight was more than just a prank. It was a beginning. The prince felt a wave of inspiration, knowing that the courage he had shown today would stay with him, guiding him in ways he had yet to imagine. The whispers of the crowd, the applause, the smiles, and the pride of his family all created a rich tapestry of experience that the prince carried forward. He had learned that courage could come in unexpected moments, that playfulness could lead to real achievement, and that music could be both a mirror of self and a bridge to others. As he left the hall, his mind was alive with ideas, melodies, and possibilities, and he knew that this evening, born from a playful joke, would become a story to remember, not just for himself, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The next day, the palace was alive with stories about what had happened at the music hall. Courtiers, staff, and even a few visiting dignitaries had heard about the young prince's unexpected performance. Whispers of amazement traveled through the halls, and everyone seemed eager to talk about the courage and talent displayed by someone so young. The prince, however, moved quietly through his morning routine, carrying a secret excitement in his heart. He was still replaying the melody in his mind, imagining how each note had felt under his fingers, and how the crowd had reacted. In the music room, the grand piano waited silently, its polished keys gleaming as if inviting him to return. The prince approached slowly, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Even though the audience from the night before was gone, the piano seemed to hold a memory of the music that had filled the hall. He sat down, letting his hands hover over the keys, remembering the guidance from the famous pianist. A gentle smile formed on his lips as he recalled the encouragement and playful challenge, and he felt a renewed sense of confidence. Today, it was not about an audience or a prank. It was about exploring music for himself. He began playing softly, testing different combinations of notes, experimenting with rhythm and harmony. Each sound felt fresh, each melody a discovery. Sometimes he would pause, reflecting on how one chord flowed into another, how different patterns could create surprising effects. The prince realized that the piano could express feelings he had not yet found words for. Joy, curiosity, excitement, even a little nervousness. All could find a place in his music. The room became a quiet sanctuary, where he could explore and create without judgment, and the prince cherished every moment. Later, the famous pianist returned to the palace for a private rehearsal. Hearing about the prince's performance, they were curious to see what he might do without the audience watching. The pianist entered quietly, carrying an air of warmth and playful expectation. "Shall we see what you've discovered?" they asked, smiling. The prince nodded, slightly nervous but excited to share. He played a melody he had been practicing, experimenting with new rhythms and chords, allowing himself to be fully expressive. The pianist listened intently, occasionally tilting their head in surprise or nodding in approval. It was clear that the young prince's natural creativity and curiosity were growing rapidly. As the morning progressed, the prince became more adventurous. He tried more complex sequences, blending melodies he had heard in lessons with his own improvisations. At times, he stumbled or pressed the wrong key, but the pianist encouraged him to continue. "Mistakes are part of learning," they said kindly. "Sometimes they even lead to something wonderful." The prince began to understand that music was not just about playing perfectly, but about expressing oneself and discovering new possibilities. Each note was an opportunity, each melody a journey. His confidence grew, and with it, a sense of freedom he had not felt before. Word of the prince's growing skill spread quickly. Staff members passing by the music room could hear the gentle tunes drifting into the halls. Some paused to listen, smiling at the beauty of the music, marveling at how a young child could play with such curiosity and feeling. The prince noticed the quiet attention but did not stop. Instead, he felt inspired, understanding that his music could bring joy to others as well as himself. He began experimenting with dynamics, learning how to make the piano whisper softly or sing loudly, feeling the power of expression in every movement of his hands. The pianist introduced exercises that challenged the prince in new ways, teaching him about timing, phrasing, and how to create tension and release within a melody. Each lesson was both structured and playful, allowing the prince to learn while still exploring his own ideas. Sometimes the pianist would encourage him to improvise freely, while other times they would guide him gently to focus on precision and technique. The prince embraced the balance, discovering that discipline and creativity could coexist. He felt alive with the joy of discovery, thrilled by the endless possibilities within the piano. During one lesson, the pianist asked the prince to close his eyes and play from memory. The young prince hesitated at first, unsure if he could remember all the notes. But as he began, the music flowed naturally. His fingers moved confidently, guided by intuition and memory rather than sight. The pianist watched in amazement, nodding and smiling. "You are learning to trust yourself," they said. "That is the most important lesson of all." The prince felt proud, realizing that music was teaching him more than just notes. It was teaching him patience, focus, and self-belief. In the afternoons, the prince would sometimes play quietly for the staff, who had become accustomed to hearing his melodies echoing through the palace. Their smiles and gentle applause encouraged him further, but he also learned to play simply for the joy of it, without expecting recognition. Music became a companion, a source of comfort and excitement. He experimented with emotion, trying to express sadness, happiness, curiosity, and surprise through the piano. The room transformed with every chord, becoming a space where imagination and feeling intertwined. As the days passed, the prince's confidence grew beyond the palace walls. He began imagining new ways to combine melodies, creating patterns and variations that he had never considered before. The pianist encouraged him to record his improvisations on paper, teaching him the basics of notation. This added a new layer of challenge and excitement, as he could now capture his ideas and revisit them later. The young prince felt empowered, realizing that he could shape music in a way that was uniquely his own. Occasionally, the prince would peek at the grand piano in the hall where the prank had taken place. He remembered the nervousness, the thrill, and the unexpected applause. That experience had sparked something inside him, a willingness to embrace the unknown and discover what he was capable of. Each time he played now, he felt a connection to that moment, a reminder that courage and curiosity could transform any situation into an opportunity for growth. Evenings were often quiet, with only the prince and the pianist remaining in the music room. They would discuss what he had played, exploring ways to improve or expand on melodies. The pianist shared stories of their own experiences, of times when mistakes had led to unexpected beauty, or when improvisation had sparked creativity in surprising ways. The prince listened intently, absorbing wisdom while feeling inspired to create his own path. He understood that music was more than performance. It was a dialogue between the musician, the instrument, and the world around them. One afternoon, the pianist suggested they compose a short piece together. The prince's eyes widened with excitement as they began experimenting with notes, rhythms, and harmonies. The process was collaborative, playful, and full of laughter. The prince discovered that music could be a conversation, not just a solo act, and that sharing ideas could make the experience richer. They worked for hours, building a piece that was simple yet expressive, each note carefully chosen and each rhythm thoughtfully placed. By the end, the prince felt a deep sense of accomplishment, proud not just of the result, but of the process itself. As the weeks went by, the prince's skill continued to grow. He became more confident in his touch, more aware of dynamics, and more adventurous in his improvisation. The pianist encouraged him to take small risks, to explore melodies that were unfamiliar or challenging. The prince embraced these challenges, discovering that each new experiment brought a sense of wonder and discovery. He began to see music not as something to be performed perfectly, but as something alive and flexible, a medium for expressing curiosity, emotion, and imagination. The young prince also began to notice how music affected those around him. Staff members who had been skeptical of his abilities were now captivated by his playing. Other children visiting the palace were inspired to try new instruments themselves. The prince felt a sense of responsibility, understanding that his music could influence and encourage others. Yet he remained humble, recognizing that learning was a lifelong journey and that every note he played was part of a larger adventure. By the end of part 3, the prince had transformed from a curious child, responding to a playful prank, into a young musician, discovering his own abilities and voice. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities for growth, and each note played was a step forward in his journey. The piano had become a trusted friend, a space for exploration, creativity, and self-expression. What began as a joke had evolved into a meaningful path of learning, courage, and inspiration. The prince knew that this was only the beginning, and that music would continue to teach him lessons far beyond the walls of the palace and the expectations of the audience. Each day, each melody, and each experiment brought him closer to understanding not just the piano, but himself. The day of the special recital had arrived, and the palace was alive with excitement. Guests from near and far had gathered to witness the young prince's music. Word of his talent had spread, and many were curious to see if he could perform in front of an audience as confidently as he had in private. The prince felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as he prepared for the event. Though he had grown more confident over the past days, the presence of so many eyes and cameras made his heart race. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of everything he had learned and practiced, and of the joy that music had brought him. As he entered the hall, the piano gleamed under the lights, waiting for him. The audience fell silent as he approached, a mix of curiosity and excitement filling the room. The famous pianist, who had been mentoring him, was seated at the side, offering a reassuring smile and a subtle nod of encouragement. It was clear that this was no longer a playful challenge but an opportunity for the prince to showcase his skill and creativity. He placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes for a brief moment, centering himself and recalling the melodies that had become familiar over the past weeks. The first notes were soft and tentative, almost as if testing the waters. The audience listened in rapt attention, sensing the importance of the moment. Gradually, the prince's confidence grew, and the melody began to flow more freely, each chord carrying both expression and emotion. The pianist watched intently, occasionally nodding, impressed by the depth of feeling in the young performer's playing. The prince's fingers moved gracefully, not just executing notes, but telling a story through rhythm, dynamics, and harmony. As the performance continued, the prince began to experiment with improvisation. He added variations to the melodies he had practiced, exploring new harmonies and patterns. The audience was captivated, watching a young musician who had taken a playful challenge and turned it into a powerful display of talent and courage. The pianist's eyes shone with pride, knowing that the prince had not only learned technique, but had discovered the joy of self-expression through music. Every note resonated with confidence and creativity, showing that he had embraced the piano as a true companion and tool for communication. Occasionally, the pianist leaned forward to offer a gentle suggestion, encouraging the prince to explore new ideas or adjust his phrasing. The prince listened carefully, incorporating the advice into his playing while maintaining his own voice. It was a delicate balance between guidance and independence, and he handled it with remarkable maturity. The audience seemed to sense the journey unfolding, as if they were witnessing not just a performance, but a young musician's personal growth and courage. When the performance reached its climax, the prince allowed himself to take risks, experimenting with bold chords and unexpected rhythms. The room was filled with a sense of awe and wonder, as if everyone present could feel the energy and emotion emanating from the piano. Some audience members leaned forward, holding their breath, while others smiled and nodded in appreciation. The prince's family watched with pride, their hearts swelling at the sight of their child performing with such poise and confidence. It was a moment of shared joy and admiration, connecting the performer, the audience, and the piano in a unique and unforgettable experience. After the final note, there was a brief silence, a collective pause as everyone absorbed what they had witnessed. Then, applause erupted, loud and heartfelt, echoing through the hall. The prince's face lit up with a mixture of relief and pride, his eyes sparkling as he looked toward the pianist and his family. The famous pianist rose from their seat, clapping enthusiastically and offering a warm smile. "I only meant to tease you at first," they said, "but you've taken this experience and turned it into something remarkable. Well done." The prince felt a surge of happiness and accomplishment, realizing that the journey from a playful prank to a true performance had taught him more than he could have imagined. Guests approached to offer compliments and congratulations, some expressing amazement at the depth of emotion conveyed by someone so young. Journalists took careful notes, eager to share the story of a young prince who had responded to a playful challenge with courage, creativity, and grace. The prince received each compliment with a polite smile, but he also felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that the most meaningful achievement was the personal growth he had experienced and the joy he had found in music. Later, in a quieter moment, the pianist invited the prince to sit down beside them and reflect on the performance. They discussed the choices made, the emotions conveyed, and the areas where the prince had taken risks that had paid off. The prince listened attentively, absorbing each insight while thinking about how he could continue to grow. The conversation was filled with encouragement, gentle guidance, and shared excitement for future possibilities. The young prince realized that music was not just about playing notes correctly, but about telling a story, expressing emotion, and connecting with others. As the event came to an end, the prince wandered back to the piano for a few final notes, playing softly for himself and for the room that had witnessed his journey. The experience was deeply personal, a reflection of the lessons learned, the courage shown, and the joy discovered. He felt a strong connection to the instrument, understanding that it had become more than just an object. It was a partner in expression, a companion in exploration, and a bridge to communication that transcended words. The palace staff and family members observed quietly, appreciating the transformation they had seen in the young prince. What had started as a playful suggestion from a famous pianist had grown into a moment of authentic expression, courage, and inspiration. The prince had learned that embracing challenges, taking risks, and trusting oneself could lead to experiences far richer than any expectation or pretense. Music had become a mirror reflecting not only his talent but his character, creativity, and curiosity. In the days that followed, the story of the prince's performance spread even further, reaching people beyond the palace walls. Articles and social media posts shared the tale of a young musician who had turned a joke into a moment of genuine artistry. The prince received letters and messages of encouragement from other young musicians, praising his bravery and creativity. He felt inspired not only to continue learning and practicing but also to share his love for music with others. The experience had sparked a desire to explore new melodies, try new compositions, and continue growing both as a musician and as a person. The famous pianist continued to mentor the prince, guiding him through new techniques, improvisations, and compositions. Each lesson was filled with playfulness, discovery, and encouragement. The prince learned that growth came not just from skill but from curiosity, courage, and the willingness to take risks. Every session strengthened his understanding of music, self-expression, and the joy of learning. The bond between the pianist and the prince grew stronger, based on mutual respect, encouragement, and a shared love of creativity. One afternoon, the pianist suggested they try composing a piece together for an upcoming private recital. The prince's eyes lit up with excitement, eager to create something new. They experimented with melodies, harmonies, and rhythms, laughing at mistakes and celebrating unexpected discoveries. The process was collaborative, playful, and deeply rewarding. The prince realized that music could be a conversation, a dialogue between imagination and reality, creativity and technique. Each composition was not just notes on paper but a reflection of emotion, thought, and curiosity. As part 4 drew to a close, the prince had transformed completely from the child who had been shy and uncertain in front of the grand piano into a young musician full of confidence, creativity, and curiosity. He had learned to embrace challenges, trust himself, and explore the possibilities of expression. The piano had become a trusted friend and a channel for his imagination, allowing him to communicate feelings and ideas beyond words. What had begun as a playful prank had become a profound journey of growth, courage, and self-discovery, setting the stage for even greater adventures in music and in life. The young prince awoke the next morning with a sense of quiet excitement. The past days had been filled with music, discovery, and growth, but today felt special. He knew that the journey from a playful prank to genuine performance had not only shown him the joy of music, but had also revealed something important about himself: courage, curiosity, and the power of embracing opportunities. As he moved through the palace, he felt a new sense of purpose, knowing that music could be both a personal companion and a bridge to connect with others. He spent the morning in the music room, his fingers lightly brushing over the keys. Each note seemed to hold a memory of past experiments, lessons, and performances. The piano no longer felt like a challenge or a test. It felt like a friend, a partner in creativity and exploration. He began to play melodies he had improvised over the past days, blending them with newly discovered rhythms and harmonies. Each sound carried confidence, curiosity, and joy, reflecting both his growing skill and the personal growth he had experienced. The pianist, who had returned to the palace to continue mentorship, observed quietly, offering gentle encouragement and occasional tips, but mostly allowing the prince to explore freely. The palace staff began to gather quietly around the music room, drawn by the gentle flow of music that drifted into the halls. Some paused in doorways, listening in awe, while others leaned quietly against walls, smiles spreading across their faces. They had come to admire not just the prince's talent, but also his courage and curiosity. Each note seemed to tell a story, a reflection of his journey from uncertainty to confidence, from playfulness to genuine self-expression. The pianist watched the reactions of the listeners, seeing the same spark of inspiration that had captivated the prince. After a while, the prince paused and looked at the pianist. "I want to try something new," he said, his voice full of determination. The pianist nodded, intrigued, and asked him to explain. The prince described an idea for a piece that combined different melodies he had learned and improvised, including rhythms that reflected emotions like excitement, surprise, and calm. The pianist smiled, impressed by both the creativity and the courage it took to attempt something unfamiliar in front of an audience, even if that audience was small and informal. "Let's give it a try," the pianist said, and together they began to experiment, exploring the ideas and refining the piece. As the afternoon progressed, the prince played continuously, exploring the full range of the piano and discovering new ways to express ideas and emotions. He experimented with soft whispers of sound, delicate melodies, and bold, dramatic chords. The pianist occasionally guided him, offering subtle adjustments, but mostly allowed the young musician to find his own path. Each new exploration brought excitement and satisfaction, as the prince realized that music was a living, breathing form of communication. It could express joy, curiosity, bravery, and even playfulness, all at once. Later in the day, the prince's family joined him in the music room, curious to see his progress. They watched quietly as he played, amazed at how far he had come in such a short time. The pianist stepped aside, giving the prince full space to perform, and the young musician seized the opportunity. He combined familiar melodies with new improvisations, creating a piece that was both playful and expressive, structured yet free. His fingers moved with confidence and grace, and the music seemed to fill the room with warmth and inspiration. The family's faces reflected pride and amazement, not just at the performance but at the growth and courage the prince had displayed. As the day turned to evening, the prince decided to play one final piece for the day. He closed his eyes, letting his emotions guide his fingers. Each note flowed naturally, telling a story of the journey he had taken, from uncertainty to confidence, from curiosity to mastery. The pianist watched, their eyes reflecting admiration and joy. They knew that the young prince had not only learned music, but had also discovered the value of courage, perseverance, and self-expression. Each chord and rhythm was a testament to the lessons learned and the personal growth achieved. When the final note faded, the room was filled with a profound silence, a moment of reflection and awe. Then applause gently rose from the family and staff who had been quietly listening. The prince opened his eyes, smiling with satisfaction and pride. The pianist approached, offering a warm embrace and congratulations. "You have done more than I could have imagined," they said. "This journey has been about more than music. It has been about courage, curiosity, and discovering your own voice. You should be proud." The prince felt a deep sense of accomplishment and happiness, knowing that this was only the beginning of a lifelong journey with music. In the following days, the prince continued to explore the piano, discovering new melodies, experimenting with harmonies, and learning more about expression and improvisation. Each session was filled with curiosity, creativity, and joy. The pianist remained a constant guide and companion, encouraging the prince to take risks, embrace mistakes, and trust his instincts. Together, they explored new musical landscapes, discovering not only technical skill, but also the power of imagination, courage, and self-expression. The story of the young prince's journey began to spread beyond the palace walls. Guests, staff, and visitors shared tales of how a playful prank had turned into a journey of courage, discovery, and artistic growth. Journalists and writers highlighted the prince's creativity, confidence, and willingness to explore new experiences. People admired not only his musical skill but also his bravery and curiosity, and the tale became an inspiration for others, young and old alike. The prince felt a quiet sense of responsibility, understanding that his journey could encourage others to embrace challenges and trust themselves. The piano became a central part of the prince's daily life, a place where he could explore, create, and reflect. Each session brought new discoveries, and each melody carried a sense of adventure, playfulness, and emotional depth. The pianist continued to mentor him, offering guidance, encouragement, and inspiration, but always allowing the prince to find his own voice. Together, they explored the limitless possibilities of music, discovering that creativity, courage, and curiosity were as important as technical skill. Over time, the prince's confidence extended beyond music. He began to approach challenges in other areas with the same curiosity and bravery, inspired by the lessons learned at the piano. He realized that stepping into the unknown, embracing mistakes, and trusting oneself could lead to growth, discovery, and joy in many aspects of life. The playful prank that had started it all had become a symbol of opportunity, courage, and the transformative power of trying something new. In the evenings, when the palace was quiet, the prince would often sit at the piano, reflecting on his journey. He played softly, letting the music flow naturally, expressing thoughts and feelings that words could not capture. The pianist would sometimes join him, sharing in the melodies and improvisations, creating a space of collaboration, learning, and mutual inspiration. The music became a way to communicate, connect, and explore both imagination and emotion. Each note was a reminder of courage, curiosity, and the joy of discovery. As Part 5 concluded, the young prince had fully embraced the piano, music, and the lessons it offered. What had begun as a playful prank from a famous pianist had evolved into a journey of courage, self-expression, and personal growth. The prince had discovered his own voice, gained confidence, and learned the value of curiosity and experimentation. The experience had not only shaped his musical abilities, but had also influenced his character, inspiring him to approach challenges with courage, creativity, and an open heart. Music had become a lifelong companion, a source of joy, and a means of expressing the essence of who he was. The prince knew that this was only the beginning of many adventures with music. He looked forward to exploring new melodies, creating compositions, and continuing to learn from the pianist who had guided him with encouragement, playfulness, and wisdom. The lessons of courage, curiosity, and self-expression would stay with him, shaping not only his musical journey but his life as a whole. From a playful prank to a profound journey of growth and discovery, the young prince had learned that the courage to try, the curiosity to explore, and the willingness to embrace opportunities could lead to moments of joy, inspiration, and lasting impact. The piano had become a symbol of that journey, a trusted companion, and a window into the limitless possibilities of creativity, expression, and courage.